A woman's ghost helped convict the man who took her life. A perfectly functioning Navy blimp was found with the pilots mysteriously missing. Vampires, occult vanishings, leaping devilish figures, and incredible UFO reports. These are true stories that will terrify you. In 1897, a young woman named Zona Heister-Shue was found dead at the bottom of the stairs in her home in Greenbriar County, West Virginia. A doctor came out to look at the body, but her husband Erasmus was so worked up, hovering over her, holding her head, crying, that the doctor couldn't really do a proper examination. They buried her, and that probably would have been the end of it, but then Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, started talking. She said that for 4 nights in a row, her daughter's spirit came to her bedside and told her that Erasmus had gotten angry about something at dinner, lost control, and snapped her neck. It didn't feel like a normal dream. These were incredibly vivid encounters, but all the same, a grieving mother claiming her dead daughter visited her in the night is easy to dismiss. Mary Jane was very persistent though, and actually managed to convince the local prosecutor to dig up the body. And when they did the autopsy, they found everything the mother told them that her daughter's ghost had described. Zona had a crushed windpipe, fractured vertebrae in the neck. Erasmus Shue went to trial and was convicted. This is probably the only case in American legal history where a ghost story put a man in prison. Skeptics will say Mary Jane just had suspicions and made up the ghost story to get people to listen, which is fair, but she described the exact injuries before anyone had opened that coffin. That part's never had a clean explanation. And no, the mother was not at the house the time Zona died, so she didn't do it herself. In August 1942, a Navy blimp called the L-8 took off from Treasure Island in San Francisco on a routine submarine patrol. 2 experienced pilots were on board, Ernest Cody and Charles Adams. About 90 minutes in, they radioed back to report an oil slick on the water below, but that was the last anyone had heard of them. A few hours later, the blimp showed up drifting over San Francisco on its own. When eventually it came down, people rushed over expecting to find wreckage and bodies, but the cockpit was empty. The door was hanging open, but neither parachute had been touched. The life raft was still packed up. The pilots' hats were sitting on the dashboard. There was a half-eaten sandwich near the controls. There had been no fire. There was no damage, no sign of any struggle. And the radio was working fine. The fuel tanks were also almost full. The coast was searched. The water was searched, but not a single trace of either man was ever found. There's a small town in England called Erdington. It was there that in 1817, a 20-year-old woman named Mary Ashford was found dead in a park. She'd been out the night before at a dance, visited a friend, and was walking home when someone attacked her. A man named Abraham Thornton was arrested for the crime. He was eventually acquitted because there just wasn't enough evidence. 157 years later, in 1974, in that exact park, a 20-year-old woman named Barbara Forrest was found dead in the same area. She'd also been at a dance the night before. She had also visited a friend. Same cause of death, and police arrested a man whose name was Michael Ian Thornton, same surname as the man arrested in 1817. He was also eventually acquitted. Both crimes happened on Whit Monday. Both victims were 20, same location, same sequence of events, suspects with the same last name, and both walked free. These cases line up eerily well. In 1829, a family called McDonald's living in Ontario, Canada, started having what looked at first like a petty neighbor dispute. Roof poles were suddenly toppling and nearly landing on the women while they worked outside, but then rocks and lead bullets started coming through the windows. The family figured someone nearby was trying to drive them off their land, so they decided to catch whoever it was themselves. They came up with a specific test. They wanted to try and track the stones, so every time a rock or bullet came through a window, they'd pick it up, carve a unique mark into it, and then take it off the property. Sometimes they'd row out to the middle of a nearby river and drop it in the water. But sometimes, stones that they'd marked would come smashing back through a boarded up window, still wet. How and why would someone dive to the bottom of a river and locate one specific small stone to hurl through their window? The story spread, and eventually hundreds of people traveled to the farm to see it for themselves. The activity only stopped after the family consulted a local seer, who told them that they were victims of a curse from a woman they had a land dispute with years prior. The seer's instructions were to find a black goose and shoot it in the wing with a silver bullet. Desperate, John MacDonald did exactly that. He tracked down a stray black goose and fired. The bird was hit in the wing and escaped into the brush. Immediately after, the family went to the home of the woman they suspected of the curse, and they found her sitting on her porch with a freshly broken arm, injured in the exact same spot as the goose. Story goes, the activity on the farm stopped that very day. But the house later burnt to the ground in 1930, nearly a century later. For 2 weeks in a row in the summer of 1952, something was flying over the most restricted airspace in the United States. It started with radar operators at National Airport picking up 7 low-moving objects. At the same time, pilots flying nearby were reporting bright white lights that could move at incredible speed. These things were flying directly over the White House and the Capitol, airspace that is completely off limits to everything. The Air Force sent up F-94 jets to intercept them. Every time the jets got close, the objects accelerated and disappeared off radar. The second the jets turned back to base, the objects returned. The public panic was real enough that the Air Force held its biggest press conference since World War II ended. Their official explanation was that temperature inversions in the atmosphere were bending radar signals and reflecting lights from the ground, but the radar operators and the pilots who were actually there, they rejected that completely. They'd watched these things accelerate to thousands of miles per hour. That is not a weather phenomenon. In 1944, people in Mattoon, Illinois started waking up sick. The first victim was a woman who woke up nauseous and found she couldn't move her legs at all. Her husband looked out the window and saw this tall, thin figure in dark clothes holding some kind of device. And over the next 2 weeks, dozens of people across the town reported the same thing. A sweet smell, then nausea, then temporary paralysis. The police were flooded with calls like this. Now, the easy dismissal is mass hysteria. People hear about a scary thing, they start imagining symptoms, it spreads, but the doctors who examined the victims actually did find physical signs of chemical exposure. Nobody was ever caught, though. The case is unsolved to this day. In 1932, in the Atlas neighborhood of Stockholm, Sweden, police broke into an apartment to check on a 32-year-old woman that nobody had seen in a while. She was dead in her bed. Next to her body was a large silver ladle stained red. When the medical examiner looked at the body, he found that she'd been almost completely drained of her blood. There was nothing on the floor, though. None of it had soaked into the mattress. It had all been collected. The only bits left behind were on the ladle. Police also found saliva on her neck, but without DNA technology at the time, that lead went nowhere. Nothing was stolen from the apartment. There was no obvious motive. No one was ever identified. The unknown assailant was simply nicknamed the Vampire of Atlas. In late 1929, a woman named Netta Fornario arrived on the tiny Scottish island Iona. Netta was a high-ranking member of an occultist group in London. She traveled with massive trunks full of furniture and strange ritualistic items. She told her host that she was there to perform a, quote, terrible case of healing involving spirits. She was not your average tourist, but as the weeks went by, her behavior shifted from eccentric to genuinely concerning. On a Sunday in November, Netta came out of her room in a total panic, claiming she was being physically attacked by people back in London and that she'd seen a, quote, rudderless ship crossing the sky. She demanded to leave the island immediately, but since there were no ferries on Sundays, she was forced to stay. By the time Monday morning rolled around, Netta had vanished into the night. It took 2 days of searching the 3-mile island before she was finally found near a spot known as Ferry Hill. Netta was lying on her back on top of a cross that had been roughly carved into the ground. She was completely naked aside from a thin black cloak and a crucifix around her neck, a necklace that had been silver before but was now, for whatever reason, completely black. She had a few scratches on her toes, but the rest of her body was virtually uninjured. Her friends in the occult community later claimed she'd gone on a, quote, astral expedition and just never returned to her body. But the official cause of death was listed as exposure. Next up, we have the story of Springheel Jack. So everyone knows about Jack the Ripper, terrorizing Whitechapel in London during the late Victorian era, but about 50 years before that, there was this other mysterious Jack, Springheel Jack. And some people weren't even sure that he was human. Londoners started saying they were being attacked by this weird guy who looked almost ghostly or devilish. People described him with clawed hands, glowing red eyes, in a black cloak that sometimes made him look like he had wings. Sometimes he'd knock on doors, and when the person answered, he'd slash at them with his claws. Other times he'd just jump out of an alleyway as people were walking the streets at night. People also said he would leap insane distances. No one ever figured out who he really was. Maybe it wasn't even one person. It could have been copycats, because sightings were reported all the way up in Scotland at one point. In April 1964, a police officer named Lonnie Zamora was chasing a speeding car outside Socorro, New Mexico, when he heard a loud roar and saw a flame in the sky nearby. He broke off the chase, thinking that a shack full of dynamite had blown up or something, but when he got to the area, he found something that he couldn't explain. It was this white, egg-shaped craft sitting on 4 legs in a gully. There were 2 small figures in white coveralls standing near it. When they noticed Zamora, they quickly moved back inside, and then the craft took off with a blue flame, and it was gone. What investigators found when they arrived less than an hour later were 4 deep rectangular holes pressed into the dirt, where the legs of this craft had been. The ground was still hot. A patch of nearby bushes had been burnt, but only the tops of the leaves, which meant that the heat came from above. The Air Force also analyzed the soil and found that it had been fused into this glass-like material by incredibly high temperatures. Zamora's account is still considered one of the most credible UFO reports in government records. And that's been the video. I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next one. What the f***? Sawing and like someone's playing a piano? What the hell's going on all of a sudden? Jesus.